Today, Senate Democrats released their multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure plan, the second of the two major packages in President Biden's agenda. What's in it and how do they plan to pay for it? German drug company BioNTech's profits surged in the last quarter, benefiting from the vaccine it developed with Pfizer. And a federal judge signs with Norwegian Cruise Line, allowing it to require passengers to show proof they're vaccinated, as despite Florida's ban on vaccine passports. That and much more, coming up in NTD Business. Good evening, great to have you with us. I'm Paul Graney. One of America's largest meat producers, Tyson Foods, is warning about rising costs. Reported quarterly earnings today and beat estimates. The company's chief executive says they can't raise prices fast enough to keep up with higher costs for raw materials like grain. It's increased prices for restaurant customers already. It's now planning to raise retail prices in early September. In the last quarter, Tyson increased its average price for pork by about 40%, beef by about 12%, and chicken about 16%. But even still, sales volumes went up. Total quarterly sales were up nearly $2.5 billion from a year earlier. And German pharmaceutical giant BioNTech saw its profits surge in the second quarter of 2021. The company works with Pfizer to put out a jointly developed CCP virus vaccine. BioNTech says it made a net profit of nearly $3.3 billion in the second quarter. This boosted net profit in the first half of the year to more than $4.6 billion, as compared to a net loss of almost $167 million in the first half of 2020. The company said the windfall from its mRNA-based vaccine will help it develop drugs against cancer and other diseases. Vaccine partner Pfizer says its second quarter 2021 revenues totaled $19 million. That's up 92% compared to the same period last year. The growth mainly driven by the vaccine. And Berkshire Hathaway's earnings are rising as the economy recovers, beating estimates on both top and bottom lines. Berkshire, of course, owned by Warren Buffett, widely considered the most successful investor of all time. NTD's Don Ma gives us an update.
Berkshire Hathaway far exceeded analyst estimates. Its earnings per share around $18,000 was 30% higher than estimates of around $14,000, and revenues of $96.5 billion were 15% higher than estimates of $83.7 billion. The company says the COVID-19 pandemic negatively affected most of our operating businesses, with the effects ranging from relatively minor to severe. But now, over the second half of 2020 and continuing in 2021, many of these businesses experienced significant recoveries in revenues and earnings, in some instances exceeding pre-pandemic levels. For example, after-tax earnings on its railroad business rose 34% in the second quarter. They attribute this to higher freight volumes and lower costs due to improved productivity. However, in insurance, after-tax earnings from insurance investment income declined $149 million in the second quarter, a drop of 10.9%, and $327 million in the first 6 months, a drop of 11.9%. Berkshire says the decline was primarily due to lower interest income earned on cash and short-term investments in U.S. Treasury bills, and Berkshire has continued its vigorous share buybacks. Warren Buffett's company bought back $6 billion worth of shares in Q2, making its 6-month total $12.6 billion. Berkshire bought back a record of $24.7 billion last year. Don Ma, NTD News.
And a federal judge is ruling that Norwegian cruise lines can require passengers to show proof of vaccination before boarding a ship. That's in spite of the Florida governor's efforts to ban vaccine passports. The cruise line argued that the vaccine passport ban jeopardizes public health and is unconstitutional. The judge said it would likely prevail, and it did. Governor Ron DeSantis, though, signed a measure in May barring private businesses from implementing vaccine passport-type systems in the state. The judge blocked the governor from enforcing the law against the cruise ship operator. Company CEO says the measures are to ensure the health and safety of all on board. And under current plans, all passengers and crew will have to be fully vaccinated and must take CCP virus tests before boarding. Masks are back for Amazon's warehouse employees in the U.S. It says workers need to start wearing masks again from today, even if they're vaccinated. Last week, Amazon also said it would delay its office return for corporate employees till early next year. The back-to-back announcements highlight how one of America's largest employers is rethinking its virus policies in the face of rising infections. A growing number of big companies have shifted their policies for corporate and frontline workers as the pandemic changes, in some cases requiring vaccinations. But for now, Amazon does not appear to be taking that step. And Senate Democrats have unveiled a budget resolution with a hefty price tag of $3.5 trillion. It doesn't include an increase to the debt limit. Democrats plan to advance it through the reconciliation process. That means they can get it by without any Republican support. The blueprint includes more money for healthcare, climate, education, and family services. It calls for free pre-kindergarten for 3- and 4-year-olds and 2 years of free community college. It would also extend tax breaks for children and some low-income earners while establishing paid family and sick leave. It also calls for giving legal status to millions of immigrants living in the United States illegally and more money to strengthen border security. Democrats are planning to pay for it with the tax increases on the rich and corporations. But the budget resolution is just the first step and allow ahead to committees to write and start drafting the reconciliation bill. Michael Bustler is a finance professor at Stockton University. I got his thoughts on the big budget deficits the bill has outlined for the next 10 years.
Well, number one, the interest on the public debt this year will be about $400 billion. That's about 10% of the government's non-COVID spending, and it's $400 billion that can't be used for more productive purposes. As the public debt keeps rolling over, and today we're at rock bottom interest rates, but as the interest rates go up, again, even with no more debt, this annual interest expense will hit $700, $800, $900 billion a year or more, and that could put the U.S. in some very difficult positions. To make things worse, they want to pass what they call an infrastructure bill in the next day or two, which will add another $1 trillion to the deficit. And then the news today, they want to add another $3.5 trillion spending plan, which again will add to the deficit. And it's really not a 3.5. Why is that? Some of the programs that they put in there, they say will only last 3 or 4 years. Well, the reality is that once you start spending money and giving people stuff, it's very difficult to reverse it. So probably those programs will last a full decade. Also, that'll take that 3.5 trillion up to roughly 5 trillion, which will add even more to the deficit. Deficit spending right now is the wrong thing to do. We ought to try to hold spending constant, let the economy grow so tax revenue increases, and we can reduce the annual deficit. This is absolutely the wrong thing to do today. And making it worse in the short term, it will overstimulate the economy, which is already overstimulated, and it will lead to even higher inflation that we've experienced the first part of this year.
Professor Michael Bustler, Stockton University. And the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill, that's a different one, it passed a final hurdle in the Senate on Sunday night. On a final vote of 68 to 29, the Senate invoked a legislative procedure which effectively ends debate on the bill. That means the vote for a final passage will come after early Tuesday morning. Legislation is set to face uncertainty in the House, though, where House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said that she won't hold a House vote until the Senate passes that separate, much larger bill. One sticking point on the bipartisan bill was the introduction of new tax reporting requirements for, quote, brokers in the crypto space. A group of senators argued the original definition of brokers was too broad and would burden businesses and stifle their ability to innovate. The bill aims to raise $28 billion through expanding tax reporting rules for the crypto space. And after debate until last night, a number of senators agreed on an amendment with a more specific definition of brokers. The Senate just voted on adding that amendment. It would have needed every senator's vote to pass, but Senator Shelby from Alabama struck down the amendment, which means the original wording will remain. I talked to Jahan Jamali, head of education at crypto investment firm Source and Funds, asked if everything in the crypto space was above board. Why were the companies so afraid of the regulation?
In terms of wanting regulation, this is something major players in the crypto industry they want. But what we need to have is lawmakers and policymakers understand the technology. And it was, feared earlier on in the weekend that it was a case where innovation was clearly about to outpace the capacity for, policy making. And the amendment that almost passed clearly demonstrated that. And what we want to have in here in the United States is regulation that promotes innovation. Right, and the United States is the home of fintech innovation, and that's where we want to keep it. We don't want to put regulation in place that places an unnecessary burden on the innovation capabilities. Nobody in the crypto industry who's a major player is saying that they don't want to have tax reporting requirements, but it needs to be done in consideration of how the technology actually works.
Why do you think, because if everything is above board, we mentioned tax reporting requirements, and if everything is above board for the companies that it is above board, why was there so much fear in the community?
Well, the fear was that it would place a reporting requirement on developers and websites that were enabling, proof of stake cryptocurrency protocols. And let me give you just a bit of context of what that would mean. That would effectively mean that even hardware providers like a cold storage crypto wallet would have these types of reporting requirements. Now, to give you how that would be in modern terms or in terms of regular or fiat money, that would be akin to having a reporting requirement on every safe company having to report on the number of people that bought the safe, who bought the safe, and what they expect for the safe purchasers to utilize in terms of storing hard cash in there. It was just something that really clearly didn't understand how the technology works.
Jahan Jamali, Sarsen Funds. And stocks ended a wobbly day, mostly lower on Wall Street today. The Dow fell 107 points, 0.3%. S&P 500 fell 4 points, 0.1%. Nasdaq rose 24 points, about 0.2%. The amount of money spent on U.S. construction is at historic highs, whether it's commercial, office, or residential. But there's one category of buildings that is declining big time. NTD's Phil Zhou has the story.
U.S. construction spending was at a near record in June with an annualized rate of over $1.5 trillion. That's according to the U.S. Census Bureau. The annual construction spending rate is nearly double what it was back in 2003, around $900 billion. But for religious buildings such as churches, temples, synagogues, and mosques, instead of going up, spending has gone way down to around $3 billion this year. That's over a 60% drop from its record highs back in 2003. According to a Gallup poll, fewer than 50% of Americans say they are a member of a church, synagogue, or temple. It's the first time church membership is not in the majority. The figure was as high as 73% in the 1930s, when the data was first collected. Pastor Bobby Bledsoe of Dwellings Place Church in New Jersey told NTD News, "It's a different generation nowadays. Instead of building new churches, some worshipers just rent or use the other churches that are already around." One reverend told Axios News that some worshipers are engaging in different ways, such as online or at schools or warehouses. He also said there are many churches for resale, so less new construction is needed. Phil Zhou, NTD News.
The vice chairman of Samsung has qualified for parole, that's according to South Korean authorities. He was jailed in January after being convicted of bribery and embezzlement. Lee was found guilty of bribing a friend of the former president of South Korea. He served 18 months in prison for a 30-month sentence. Samsung and the wider business community appealed to the government for his early release. There were concerns that his absence was affecting some decision-making at the company, including major investments and M&A deals. Authorities say he's expected to leave prison later this week. And the CCP virus is on many people's minds, but it's actually less of a concern depending on where you live in the world. Some countries are more concerned with crime, some with poverty, and some even with corruption. NTD's Phil Zhou has the story.
Only 25% of Americans say the CCP virus is what they worry about the most. But what about the rest of the country? At 33%, the top concern in the United States is crime and violence. That's according to market research firm Ipsos, surveying over 20,000 adults in almost 30 countries. Ipsos told NTD News some countries worry about many things besides the CCP virus.
The issues that people around the world are most worried about are unemployment, poverty, social inequality, financial, political corruption, and healthcare.
For example, in Russia, people are most worried about poverty. In Colombia, it's corruption. In Italy, it's unemployment.
It's still the main concern. It does show how the world views the pandemic.
The CCP virus still got the top concern on average for the countries surveyed at around 36%. But that's way down from January when the virus was averaging 50% as a top concern. Ipsos says with all that's happening recently, it wouldn't be surprised if CCP virus concerns start inching up again. Phil Zhou, NTD News.
Still to come this evening. We take a look at how movies did over the weekend at the box office estimates, which movies made the top 5. Under news, shoes helping Olympic athletes break records. The professor tells us U.S. footwear technology is having an impact. That and more after this short break.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
Welcome back. First, we turn to the box office. We have early estimates for the weekend's top 5 movies.
I never had a chance to mourn her.
Stillwater stayed in 5th place, taking in $2.9 million. Black Widow made $4 million for 4th place and a domestic total of $174 million. Old brought in $4.1 million to remain in 3rd place.
Come on, lady.
Jungle Cruise lost the top spot, but $15.7 million in ticket sales gave it a solid second place.
You're gonna risk the entire mission for a mental defective dressed as a court jester. It's coming from a guy that wears a toilet seat on his head.
The Suicide Squad debuted on top with $26.6 million, less than expected for the comic book movie with a reported $185 million budget.
And the International Olympic Committee has declared the Tokyo Olympics officially closed, with officials claiming the Games were a success despite the pandemic. Chris Dingham reports.
Tokyo capped the 2020 Olympics on Sunday with a dazzling fireworks display, a celebratory image in contrast with an event that was not the financial windfall Japan had hoped for after postponing the Games for a year due to a global health crisis. Organizers said the unprecedented event, held mostly without spectators, would serve as a symbol of world triumph. But while organizers appeared to prevent the Tokyo Games from spiraling into a super-spreader event, daily COVID-19 infections in the host city ballooned during the Games, spiking to more than 5,000 for the first time in Tokyo and threatening to overwhelm its hospitals. Public opinion polls showed most Japanese citizens opposed holding the Games during a worldwide health crisis. In the end, Japan was saddled with a $15 billion bill, double what it initially expected, and with no tourism boom. But a record medal haul for the host nation may have helped to take out some of the sting for Japan, which won 27 gold medals. The United States finished at the top of the pack with 39 gold medals, one more than rival China at 38.
Ratings. And here's a curious question. Is new footwear technology helping Olympic athletes smash records? NTD's Miguel Moreno has more from a professor who says it is. So the next question is, should it be regulated?
A lot of records have been broken in Tokyo. At least 3 required running. Norway, for example, smashed a decades-old record in the 400-meter hurdles. Now people are asking, is footwear technology making it easier for athletes to break records?
You can see there the drastic difference in the thickness.
Jeff Burns is a sports scientist and engineer at University of Michigan. He says shoes are making a difference.
So this was a standard long-distance racing spike. So you can see it has this stiff plate on the bottom and just this thin wafer of foam. This isn't even a centimeter thick. This is 7 or 8 millimeters right there. This new generation of spikes with that foam and the stiff plate going through looks like that. So you can see this is the same size shoe, but thicker in the heel. And you can see right here this plate that goes through and it continues on to the bottom, but it's kind of sandwiched with a little bit underneath there. And this foam is much squishier.
Burns says this sandwich plate in combination with squishier foam works wonders.
And so that essentially puts this optimal surface underneath the foot of every athlete. And that speeds up their running economy. It costs less energy to run the same speed, or you can run faster for the same amount of energy.
So should shoes be regulated at the Olympics? It's an odd question, but Burns poses an interesting situation.
When an athlete breaks a record by a small amount, we can't attribute that entirely to the exceptionality of the athlete. We inevitably have to qualify it with an element of the equipment.
Now, this isn't to say records aren't being broken by athletes without the tech in question. Take Norway's Karsten Warhol. He smashed a record that stood for just under 3 decades without the magical foam, only an optimized carbon fiber plate, which Burns says is nothing new. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
As the latest business updates for today, you can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox. That's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.